The morning sun hit the Valorian manor, revealing cracks in the stone that the shadows had hidden the night before. I sat in the dining hall, drinking black coffee, reviewing the ledgers. The situation was worse than I thought. The estate was bleeding money, but it was fixable. Mathematically, I could save it. My focus was shattered by the sound of heavy carriage wheels grinding against the gravel outside. Then came the shouting. The unmistakable sound of arrogant men imposing their will on those who cannot fight back. The double doors of the dining hall swung open. It wasn't an invasion. It was worse. It was a debt collector. Sebastian walked in. For the first time, the old butler didn't look stern. He looked defeated. He held a silver tray, but his hands were shaking slightly. "Sir," Sebastian said, his voice low as if he were announcing a death. "Viscount Garmen is here. He has brought his personal guards. He says time is up." Garmen. The name triggered a memory from the old Aric's brain, a fat, greasy noble who owned the gambling dens in the capital. He was one of the friends who had encouraged Aric to drink, to bet, to lose. He had lent Aric gold with a smile, knowing fully well he would come for the land when the money ran out. I walked to the window. In the courtyard, I saw him, Viscount Garmen. He was stepping out of his carriage dressed in garish red velvet that strained against his stomach. He looked like a tick, bloated with the blood of others. He was shouting at a young maid, pointing his cane at the manor as if he already owned it. "He is demanding the deed to the estate, sir," Sebastian continued, avoiding my eyes. He says time is up." I felt a cold rage settle in my chest. Not fear, rage. This man wasn't just here for money. He was here to strip the flesh off a carcass. If he takes the manor, I have nothing to offer Alara for the divorce. My ticket home, my freedom, my survival, everything depends on this land. Sebastian looked at me, expecting the usual reaction. He expected me to cry, to beg him to hide me, or to run to the wine cellar. Instead, I finished my coffee. I set the cup down with a deliberate, sharp clink. "Sebastian," I said, my voice steady, "show the Viscount into the main drawing room. Offer him tea. Tell him the Baron will be with him shortly." Sebastian looked up, confused. "Sir, but do you have the gold?" I turned toward the library, a cold smile playing on my lips. "No, Sebastian, I don't have gold. I have something much more valuable." I left Sebastian trembling in the hallway and walked calmly toward the library. The heavy oak doors closed behind me, shutting out the noise of Garmen's shouting in the courtyard. In here, the air was still. It smelled of old parchment and dust, the scent of pure, unfiltered knowledge. While the rest of the household was running around like headless chickens, terrified of a fat man in a velvet coat, I felt a strange sense of serenity. Panic is a reaction to the unknown, but I knew exactly what I was dealing with. Garmen isn't a warrior. He is a parasite, and parasites always leave a trail. I approached the genealogy section. My fingers brushed against the spine of the black book, The Principles of Siege Warfare. It was ironic. Garmen was laying siege to my home with guards and debt collectors. I was about to break his siege with a single piece of paper. I pushed the book. The mechanism clicked, a smooth, precise sound of engineering that no magic could replicate. The shelf swung open, revealing the cold, stone staircase descending into the dark. My father's legacy, the Archive of Whispers. I descended the stairs, grabbing a lantern on the way. The shadows danced on the walls, but they didn't frighten me. This was my domain now. At the bottom, the room stretched out, lined with thousands of dossiers. To an outsider, this looked like a boring clerk's office. To me, It was an armory. Every folder was a dagger. Every scroll was a sword pointed at the throat of a powerful man. I walked to the section marked Noble Houses, Merchant Class. Garmen wasn't old nobility. He was nouveau riche. He bought his title with gold earned from gambling dens and exploitation. Men like him always make the same mistake. They think gold can buy silence. They are wrong. Gold only rents silence, and eventually, the lease expires. I flipped through the G section. Galton, Guard, Garmen. I pulled the thick leather folder from the shelf. It was heavy. Garmen had been busy. I carried it to the reading table and lit a second candle. I didn't need to read his entire life story. I just needed one thing, one fatal mistake, a kill shot. I skipped the pages about his gambling debts and his mistresses. Those were scandals, yes, but they wouldn't stop him from seizing my land. Shame doesn't stop a man like Garmen. Only prison or death does. Then I found it. A series of financial transfers dated 3 years ago. I traced the numbers with my finger, doing the mental math instantly. Garmen had been appointed as the treasurer for the St. Alara Orphanage Fund, a charity run by the High Church. According to the public records, he had built a new wing for the orphans. But according to my father's spies, the construction company that received the gold was a shell company registered to Garmen's own wife. He didn't build a wing for orphans. He built a summer villa for himself. A cold smile spread across my face. Stealing from the crown is a crime, but stealing from the church, in this kingdom, that is heresy. It is a one-way ticket to the executioner's block. The high priest would have Garmen's head on a spike before sunset if he knew. Garmen came here today thinking he was the hunter. He thought he was cornering a weak, alcoholic prey. He has no idea that he just walked into the den of a monster. I took the incriminating document, a copy of the bank transfer with his signature, and folded it neatly. I didn't need a sword. I didn't need a fireball. I placed the paper inside a crisp white envelope. I stood up and smoothed out my coat. The envelope felt light in my hand, but I knew its weight. It was the weight of a man's life. It was time to go back upstairs. It was time to show the Viscount that the trash baron was dead, and the architect had taken his place. I entered the main drawing room. The air smelled of grease and expensive perfume. Viscount Garmen had made himself comfortable. He was sprawled on my grandfather's velvet sofa, his muddy boots resting on the coffee table. He was eating a tray of pastries that Sebastian had been forced to serve him, crumbs falling onto his red tunic. When he saw me, he didn't stand up. He didn't bow. He just laughed, a wet, wheezing sound. "Well, well," Garmen sneered, wiping his mouth with the back of his hand. "The trash baron finally crawls out of his hole. I was betting with my guards that you were already halfway to the border." He picked up a document from the table and waved it in the air. "The deed to the land, Valorian. Sign it, or I take the house, the horses, and your servants. I hear the mines are looking for cheap labor." Sebastian stood in the corner, his face pale, waiting for me to beg. I walked calmly to the chair opposite Garmen and sat down. I crossed my legs and smoothed the fabric of my trousers. I didn't look at the deed. I looked him straight in the eyes. "Viscount," I said, my voice conversational, as if we were discussing the weather. "I believe there has been a misunderstanding regarding my debt." Garmen's face turned red. "Misunderstanding? You owe me 50,000 gold coins. There is no misunderstanding, you drunk fool." I reached into my jacket pocket. Garmen flinched, perhaps thinking I had a knife, but I only pulled out a simple white envelope. I placed it gently on the table, between us. "I am not talking about my debt, Garmen," I said softly. "I am talking about yours." He frowned, confused. "What are you babbling about?" "The St. Alara Orphanage Fund," I whispered. The room went dead silent. The color drained from Garmen's face as fast as if he had been slapped. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. 3 years ago, I continued, leaning forward slightly, you were entrusted with the holy funds to build a new dormitory for the children. But you didn't build it, did you? You built that beautiful summer villa on the coast instead, using a shell company registered to your wife." Garmen began to tremble, not with anger this time, but with pure, primal fear. Stealing from the crown gets you prison. Stealing from the church in this kingdom gets you a public execution. I have the bank transfer records inside this envelope. I tapped the white paper with my finger. And I have a letter already written to the high priest. If this envelope leaves this room, your head will be on a spike before dinner. Garmen stared at the envelope as if it were a venomous snake. Sweat began to pour down his forehead, ruining his makeup. The arrogance was gone. The predator had become the prey. What do you want?" he stammered, his voice cracking. "First," I said, "you will sign a document stating that the Valorian debt is paid in full, including interest." He nodded frantically. "Done. Yes, done." "Second," I added, standing up, "you broke my door, you muddied my floor, and you frightened my staff. I think a donation of 10,000 gold coins to the Valorian estate would be appropriate for the distress caused. Don't you agree?" It was extortion, pure and simple, and he had no choice. Garmen signed the papers with a shaking hand. He threw a bag of gold on the table, money he likely had on him to bribe someone else, and ran. He actually ran out of the room, shouting for his carriage, desperate to escape the monster he thought was a fool. I watched through the window as his carriage tore away, dust rising in the air. I turned to Sebastian. The old butler was staring at me. He looked at the cancelled debt on the table, then at the bag of gold, and then at me. Slowly, deliberately, Sebastian bowed. It wasn't the stiff bow of a servant doing his job. It was a deep bow, a bow of respect. "What are your orders, my lord?" he asked. "Clean this room, Sebastian," I said, walking towards the door, "and pay the staff. We have work to do."